This is Unit 8, Section 1, Notes. We're going to move on to rational functions. So this first section is simplify, multiply, and divide rational expressions. So we gotta do the basics before we do the harder stuff. Okay? So this first section A is just simplify the expression and leave in factored form. Okay? So when we do this, looking at this might look like a lot. You may not know what to do. I would start with factoring out a GCF on the top and the bottom, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so if you look at the top numbers, look at the numbers first. So we have 4 and 36. I can divide both of those by 4. Okay, so I'm going to start with 4, because remember, your GCF you write out front of everything else. Okay, so I can divide both of those by 4, and then I look at my x's. I have an x in both, which means I can take at least one out. So I have x here. And you always write the smallest exponent for GCF. So my smallest exponent here is 1, so I'm just going to leave it as 4x. Okay, so that's my entire GCF for the top is 4x. Now I'm going to write parentheses. Now on the inside, you divide each term by your GCF. We've done this before, so this should be kind of review. So I'm going to do 4 divided by 4 is 1, which if you want to write 1, you can. You don't have to. Then if I have 3 x's here and I take away 1 x, I would have 2 x's left. Okay? So that's how I do that. And then I do the next one. So I have a minus. Then I do 36 divided by 4 is 9. And if I have 1 x here and I take away 1, I don't have any left. Okay? So that's the top. Then I do my line. Now I'm going to do the bottom. Okay? So same thing. I look for what number I can divide out of both. So I have 12 and 48. So 12 and 48 I can divide both by 12. And then I have an x in both, and my smallest exponent is 2. So I can take out 2 x's from each one. So my GCF is 12x squared. Now I divide. So I have 12 divided by 12 is 1. If I have 2 x's here and I take away 2, I don't have any. So if I take away everything from my term, so like I divided 12 by 12, it gives me 1. I have 2 x's, I take it away, I don't have any x's left, I'm just going to write a 1. Because that's really what's there. Because 12 divided by 12 is 1, and I just don't have any x's left over. Okay, then I have a plus. And then I do 48 divided by 12 gives me 4. And if I have 4 x's and I take away 2, I would have 2 left. Okay? So that's the top, that's the bottom. So from here, I'm going to look at my GCF first. Can I reduce my GCF, my numbers and my terms outside the parentheses? Okay, so if I look at these, I can divide 4 and 12 both by 4. So 4 divided by 4 on top is 1. 12 divided by 4 on bottom is 3. Okay? And then I look at my x's. If I have at least an x on top and an x on bottom, I can reduce. So notice if I have 1 x on top and I have 2 on the bottom, I can get rid of the 1 on top and the x would go away, which means I would get rid of 1 on bottom and I would have 1 x left over. Okay, so let's just start with that. So I'm going to have 1. So notice I have 1 and no x. So if I ever have a 1 and no x, I don't have to write a 1 unless I'm adding, which is what I did here. But let's go ahead and write it just to make it easier. So I have 1, parentheses. Now look, x squared minus 2. Now if I ever have an x squared and then minus, I have to check to see if I can factor. If it's just x squared plus a number, that's not going to happen. You can't factor those. But if I have x squared minus 9, I need to see if I can factor it. So the way that I do that is I check to see if can I take the square root of this one and this one, meaning like both terms. So I look at the number, what number is in front of x squared? Well, if there's not a number there, it's just 1, right? So can I take the square root of 1 and can I take the square root of 9? Yes, I can on both. Okay, so look, square root of 1x squared is just 1x. You do the square root of the number, which is 1, square root of x squared is x. Can I take the square root of 9? Yes, that gives me 3. Okay, so if I can do that, remember this is only true if I have x squared minus a number. So if you want to write something down here, if you haven't yet, so I have number x squared minus number, or maybe if that doesn't work, so I have a x squared minus b. If I can do square root of a x squared and square root of b, okay, let's say that gives me cx and that gives me d. So square root of a is some number, square root of b is some number. Then my answer that I would write, or how I would factor it out further, I would write cx plus d, cx minus d. Okay? So I can factor this as long as I take the square root of both terms, the a and the b. Okay, and again, we've talked about this, it's just been a while. That's why we're reviewing first before we do anything else. Okay, so I have my square root of my first and second term. So going back to this, in my parentheses, I would write 1x plus 3, right? And then 1x minus 3. So I have 1x plus 3, 1x minus 3. And then on the bottom, remember I have 3, and then I have 1x, so I have 3x. And then 1 plus 4x squared, there's nothing I can do with that. Because remember, if I'm adding an x squared, I can't factor it, but if I'm subtracting, then I might be able to. Not always, but I can sometimes. Okay, so now let's look at what's left here. I've already reduced my GCF, my 1 and 3x. I can't do anything there. Then you just see if I have any parentheses that are exactly the same on the top and bottom. On this one, I do not have that, so this would be my final answer right here. Okay, and you'll see in a minute if I have some that match what happens, but on this one I did not. So take out the GCF first, factor any x squares that you can, x squared minus a number, and then reduce. That's really what you're doing. So GCF, factor, reduce. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So GCF, let's look at the top. I have -3 and 18. Okay, I can divide those by 3, right? -3 divided by 3 and 18 divided by 3, I can do that. Now, one thing to take note is when do you know the GCF is negative? My GCF is negative if my highest exponent is negative. Okay, so in this case, see how I have the 2 and the 5? My 5 is bigger, but that number is positive, which means my GCF will also be positive. On the bottom, my bigger exponent is 4, which is negative. That means my GCF will be negative. So that's how you can tell if it's positive or negative. You look at the highest exponent, because the highest exponent should always be positive. The rest of them don't matter. It's always the highest one. Because remember, that's your degree of your polynomial, if we're talking about that. If you write in standard form, highest to lowest, your highest would go first, and you always want to start, your leading coefficient should always be positive. So anyways, so I can divide these by 3, so I'm going to go ahead and write 3. And then, of course, I have an x in both, and my lowest exponent is 2. Okay, so my GCF is 3x squared. Now I have to divide everything. So I have -3 divided by 3 is -1. And then if I have 2 x's, I take away 2, I won't have any left. Okay, so I'm done with that one. Then I do plus. Now I have 18 divided by 3 is 6. And if I have 5 x's and I take away 2, I have 3 x's left. Okay, so the top is done. Now the bottom. Okay, I have 15 and I have negative 90. Now, because my highest exponent right here is negative, that means my GCF will be negative. So if you want to, we can go ahead and start with negative, because we know it has to be. Okay, highest exponent is negative, your GCF is negative. Okay, so what number can I divide 15 and 90 by? Okay, if you already know, great. If not, that's okay. It's 15. So my GCF will be negative 15, and then I have an x in both, and my lowest exponent is 1. So I'm just going to leave it as a 1. Okay. Now I can divide everything out. So I have 15 divided by negative 15 is negative 1. And I have 1x. I took 1 away, so I don't have any more x's. Okay, then I have negative 90 divided by negative 15 will give me a plus. And then 15 goes into 90 6 times. Okay, I have 4 x's. I take away 1, I would get 3 left over. Okay, so anytime your GCF is negative, really what happens, because I'm dividing by a negative, your signs will flip. So all your positives become negative, all your negatives become positive, and that's why the signs flip down here. So let's look at this. So let's go ahead, we factored, right, or we did GCF, sorry. So we did GCF. Let's see if we can factor. I don't have any x squares left, or x to the fourths. You know, you can only do evens on these. I mean, you could do other ones, but I didn't put those in here at all. You're only going to find x squares and x to the fourth. So I don't have any x squares, so I can't factor. So I did GCF. I can't factor, so I skipped that one. Now I just want to reduce. Okay, so let's look at this. I have my GCF, my 3 and my 15. My 3, they can both be divided by 3. So 3 becomes 1. Negative 15 becomes negative 5 if I divide by 3. Okay, my x's. I have 2 and 1. So that means I can take away 1, which gets rid of this x completely, and I can take away 1 from here, and I would just have x, just 1x, right? So this is the same thing as GCF before. When I'm reducing, you always reduce by the lowest exponent. Okay, now look at these parentheses. This is what I was talking about in the first one that we didn't have, but we have it now. See how the parentheses are exactly the same? I have a negative 1 in both, and I have a plus or a positive 6x cubed. If my parentheses ever match exactly on the top and bottom, I can get rid of those completely. So those are gone. Because it's like one thing dividing by itself is 1, so it goes away. So if they ever match exactly, then you get rid of them. So I write whatever's left. So on top, let's look at what's on top. I have 1 and then x to the first power. So let's write 1x to the first power. And then on the bottom, I have negative 5, and we got rid of the x. Okay, so I have negative 5 with no x. So if I want to rewrite that, I can just write x over negative 5. You can leave it like this, that's fine. It's still technically the same thing. It's just you don't need to write the 1 in the front, and you don't need to write 1 as an exponent. Most people don't write those because you don't have to, but you can if you want to, if it helps, that's fine. So my final answer would be x over negative 5. Okay? So those are the first two. Now let's look at the last one. So let's look at GCF. Okay? So on the top, notice I have 3 terms. I can't divide all my numbers because this number is a 1 right here. So I can't divide all my numbers by the same thing. And I don't have an x in all 3, so I don't have a GCF. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the bottom first and do my GCF there. So I have negative 6 and negative 42. Okay, well my only x is negative, which means my GCF will also be negative. okay? So let's go ahead and do a fraction, and on the bottom, I know my GCF is negative down here. So what can I divide 6 and 42 by? I can divide both by 6. And look, on this one, I don't have an x in every single term, so I can't divide or take out an x. So that my GCF is just negative 6. Now I can divide my numbers. So I have negative 6 divided by negative 6 is 1. And since I can't change x, it just stays there. And then negative 42 divided by negative 6 is positive 7. Okay? So we did the bottom. That's GCF. Now, there's no GCF on the top, but I can factor the top. Okay? So we're going to have to do a lot of factoring in this chapter. So if you're good at factoring, this will be easy. If you're not, this will give you practice, and hopefully you'll become better. Okay, so to factor, if you forgot, the way I do it is I do the first number times the last number, gives me negative 35. And then you think, what two numbers can multiply to negative 35 and add to 2? Well, that would be 7 and negative 5, right? Okay, so I would always do my 2 parentheses. I'm going to do it over here just in case we have to reduce. So you always start with your first x. So I have 1x, and then I said plus 7, and then I have 1x, and then minus 5. On this one, I cannot reduce 1 and 7. I cannot reduce 1 and negative 5. So because I can't reduce those, that is those are my 2 parentheses I'm going to write. So I have 1x plus 7. 1x minus 5. Alright, so I did GCF, I did factoring, now I did reduce. Well, I don't have a GCF, there's nothing out here to reduce with the 6, the negative 6, so I can't do anything with that. But I do have these 2 parentheses right here are exactly the same, so I get rid of them. And my answer for this one is just going to be whatever's left over. So on top, I have x minus 5. Divided by the bottom, all I have left over is negative 6. And that's how you do those. Okay, your homework for these are just going to be a mix of these kinds of questions. So they'll be all different things. But these are all the things that you'll see in your homework at some point. So again, if you're really bad at factoring, I would definitely recommend doing the homework to practice. Otherwise, this will be very difficult to do. Alright, next one, multiplying. So that was just simplifying. If you notice, that was just one thing. We had one fraction, that was it. Now we're moving on, we're going to have more than one fraction. So now we want to find the product, so we're going to multiply these. Okay? The first thing that I would recommend doing, which you don't have to, but you can, I would recommend factoring out a GCF, or factoring, if you can, the polynomial. So do GCF and factoring first, then reduce, then multiply. Okay? That would definitely, and that's the way that I do it, in the order that I do it. To me, that's the easiest way to do it. If you reduce everything first before you multiply, you can certainly multiply and then reduce later. That works. But if you do it that way, you might find yourself doing some extra work that you wouldn't need to do, or kind of undoing what you already did if you don't do it first. But it's up to you. Alright, so let's look at these. I have 3x, and of course, if there's no fraction, it's just over 1. I have no GCF, I can't factor, so I'm just going to write 3x over 1 times. Now let's look at this next fraction. If we look at the top, I have no GCF, I can't factor that, so I'm just going to leave that one alone also. But the bottom, oh, I can factor that one. Or not factor, I can GCF that one, right? I have a 4 and an 8. I can divide both of those by 4. I don't have an x in both, so I can't do that. So I do 4 divided by 4 is 1, and the x is still there. Minus 8 divided by 4 is 2. Now look at that. Before we multiply, we can go ahead and get rid of stuff. I have x minus 2, x minus 2. Okay. I can't reduce anything else. Now, just for clarification, I can only reduce vertically within the same fraction. So I can reduce up and down, or I can reduce across. Those are the only ways that I can reduce stuff. So if they're the same, I can cross them off if they're up and down or diagonal. Or like if this 3 was a 4, you know, if I had numbers I can reduce or stuff like that, I can do it diagonally or up and down. I can't go across, so no horizontal. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write what we have left. So on the top over here, all this stuff, I just have 3x, and then on the right side I have 1. You know, there's a times in the middle. And then on the bottom, I have a 1, and then all that's left over here is just a 4. Okay. I can't reduce anything else, so I just multiply across on the top, multiply across on the bottom. So 3x times 1 is 3x, and then 1 times 4 is 4. And notice, because we already reduced beforehand, this is already done for us, and that's just our answer. Now, if you just multiplied straight across and then reduced later, you would still end up with the same answer. You just might find yourself doing extra work that you didn't really need to do. But kind of up to you. So yeah, that's how you do the first one. Alright, next one. Okay, I'm always just going to start in the top left corner. You can kind of go in any order, but to me that's just where you start writing, so that's where I'm going to start doing this. So look, I have 7 and 14. That gives me a GCF. So I'm going to start writing 7. And I don't have an x in both, so that's my GCF. And I divide 7 by 7 is 1. And then my x is still there. Then there's a minus. 14 divided by 7 is 2. Okay. 5x is just 5x, can't do anything there. Times, again, 5x doesn't do anything yet. And on the bottom I have a 7 and a 28. I can divide both of those by 7 also. So if I do that, and there's no x in both, so there's no x outside. So I have 7 divided by 7 is 1 and x. And then 28 divided by 7 is 4. Okay, now we can reduce. So if you notice, I can't reduce anything up and down, like vertically, because nothing's the same. But I can do diagonal. This 5x and this 5x can be reduced. So you can cross those out. And the 7s, this 7 and this 7 can also be reduced. So you can cross those out. Now these parentheses are not the exact same thing, so I cannot get rid of them. So now I can just write whatever's left over. I have x minus 2 on top divided by x plus 4 on bottom. Because I got rid of everything else, that would just be my whole answer right there. And that's it. See, if I had multiplied first, you would end up with these large numbers that you would have to reduce later, and you end up with the same thing. It's just bigger numbers, more work. I don't see the point. Alright, next one. If just looking at this, no GCF, no GCF, no GCF. So those three I can't do anything to, but this last one over here I can definitely factor. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that. So I multiply the first times the last, you get 32. Now remember, I want to multiply the 32 and add to negative 12. Okay, I'm going to go over here and do my two parentheses. You always start with your first x, so that's x and x. The reason it's only, okay, just if you forgot, I know this is x squared because the 2. I'm splitting two x's up into two different parentheses. That's why there's only one in each one. So in case you kept wondering about that, that's why. You're really splitting that first one up into 2. Alright, so what numbers multiply to 32 and add to negative 12? That would give me negative 8 and negative 4. Now, because I don't have any numbers in front of x, I cannot reduce. So that would just be my factored form. So now I can go ahead and write the rest of my stuff here. So I have 1 over x minus 4. That one, I can't do anything to that one. Times. Now, instead of this giant thing right here, I'm going to write these two parentheses. So I have x minus 8, x minus 4. And then of course the bottom over here, x minus 8, that didn't do anything. Alright, now, so we couldn't do GCF, we factored. Now we reduce. So I have 2x minus 8s, I have 2x minus 4s, and everything else is gone except for this 1, right? So my answer is just 1. I know you're probably mad at me, but that's okay. All that work for just one number. But that's how you do multiplying. Alright, last one, dividing. Now you'll like this because it's really not that much different. The biggest thing you have to remember on these is whenever you see divide, first thing you want to do is change that to multiply and then flip the second fraction. Okay? So I don't want to use that one, I want to flip it. So you change divide to multiply, flip the second fraction, and now it becomes a multiplication problem just like above. So we do the same steps. So if I look up here, I have nothing to do there, so that's just 6x divided by. I can divide 6 and 24 by 6. I have an x in each term, so I can take out an x. My smallest exponent is 1. Okay, so I do 6 divided by 6 is 1. 2x's minus 1x is 1x. And then 24 divided by 6 is 4. 1x minus 1x is no x's. Alright, now we change this to multiply, so it's times, and then we have this second fraction. I can't reduce, factor, GCF, I can't do anything. So I just write that there. Okay, so I've done everything I can, now I have to reduce. So I have 6x and 6x. I have x plus 4 and x plus 4. And you guessed it, the only thing I have left is a 1 again, so my answer is 1. Because 1 over 1 is just 1, right? Because if everything on top is gone, it's a 1 on top. Everything on bottom is gone, it's a 1 on bottom. So my answer is 1. Oh no, I did it again. All that work for just one number. It's okay. You can grab a tissue box and cry about it if you want to. Or just do the work, it's not that bad. As long as you practice. Okay, so on this one, same thing. I change this to a multiply, and then I gotta flip this whole second fraction. But before I flip it, I'm gonna go ahead and factor. So first times last gives me 22. I want to multiply to 22, add to 13. So that would give me x plus 11, x plus 2. I can't reduce either one of those, so that will be on the bottom of my fraction, right, when I flip it. So let's go ahead and write this. So this first one is going to be over 1, right, x plus 11 over 1 times. Now, since I'm flipping this second fraction, this 15 goes on top. And then these two that we factored go on bottom. Alright, now, I have factored, I have GCF'd, I've done everything I can except for reduce. So look, I have x plus 11, x plus 11. I don't have any more parentheses, so that x plus 2 is going to stay, and I can't reduce 15 and 1. That doesn't do anything. So I can just write whatever I have left. So on top, I just have 15. On bottom, if I did x plus 2 times 1, that's just x plus 2. And that would be my final answer. So see, it's not that bad. It just takes some practice. But once you get used to it, it's pretty easy. Alright, last one. If you notice, I'm going to have to factor two things. That's okay. There are some that you have to factor 4, so don't be too upset yet. Okay, so I know I have to change this to a multiply. I know I have to flip the second fraction, but before I do, I'm going to go ahead and factor these, so at least I know what to write. So 1 times negative 15 is negative 15, and I know I'm going to have 2 parentheses right here. That gives me x and x. So multiplies a negative 15 as a negative 2 is negative 5 plus 3. Can't reduce that, so I'm just going to leave that there. And then of course my x minus 8 just stays on bottom, can't do anything with that. Then I go over here, I do first times last, that gives me 40. Okay, now I know this is going to go on the bottom because I'm flipping this, right? So my x plus 3 goes on top. On the bottom, I end up with what numbers multiply to 40, add to negative 13. That's going to be x minus 8, x minus 5. Okay? Now, I can reduce. Yay! This is the fun part. You get rid of stuff. X minus 5, x minus 5. And that's it. Because remember, you cannot reduce... Oh, I'm sorry, there's a multiply there. I cannot reduce horizontally. So I can't cross out the x plus 3s. I can't cross out the x minus 8s. So I just got to write them. So look, what's left? I have on top x plus 3. And then I have x plus 3. And on bottom, I have x minus 8. And x minus 8. Now, you might be wondering, why don't you FOIL those back into a polynomial? Why don't you just write x plus 3 squared? Because if you read the directions, they say simplest factored form. If I write x plus 3 squared, that is not factored. So, I'm going to leave it just like that. That would be my final answer. You can box, circle, triangles, whatever you want to call it, and I'm done. So that is it for today's lesson. Please practice this. This is a lot. If you are already not good at this, this is going to be difficult, but you need to practice to get better.